Hello, everyone out there in Facebook land, especially those from Beth Tzedek congregation. Sorry for the delay in getting going for today's story time, and sorry for the lighting where I am too. This is Rabbi Steve Warnick, one of the rabbis at Beth Tzedek, and it's time for story time, one of the twice weekly programs we do for children and for families with young children. On Wednesday evening, we start the holiday, not really the holiday, the commemoration of Tisha B'av, when we remember the two temples that stood in Jerusalem that were destroyed a long time ago, 586 BCE, and then again 70 CE. So I thought I would share with you one of my favorite stories. This is a story called Two Brothers, and it is related to Tisha B'av. And when I tell you the story, I'll tell you how it's related to Tisha B'av. This is a story of two brothers that each inherited half of their father's farm. One of the brothers was married, and he had a very large family. The other brother was single. The brothers lived on opposite sides of a hill. One night, during harvest time, the single brother tossed about in bed. He tossed and he turned and he turned and he tossed. He couldn't sleep. Why couldn't he sleep? Because his mind was so busy thinking about his brother. How can I rest comfortably, he said, and take a full half of the yield, a full half of everything the farm produces, when my brother on the other side of the hill has so many mouths to feed? So he got up in the middle of the night. He gathered bushels of the produce together, everything that was produced from the farm, and quietly climbed the hill to bring them over to his brother's barn. Meanwhile, across the hill, the same thing happened to his brother. His brother couldn't sleep. He was tossing and turning and turning and tossing, and he was thinking, how can I enjoy my full share of the produce and not be concerned about my brother? He's alone in the world, no wife or children who will support him in his old age. So he got up in the middle of the night, and he quietly gathered all of his bushels of the produce together and carried them over to the side of the hill to put them into his brother's barn. When the next morning dawned, the next morning came, each brother was surprised that the half of their produce that they had given away had been replenished, had been returned. So they continued these nocturnal or these evening kinds of things over and over and over again. They couldn't sleep, they tossed and they turned, they gathered all the bushels together. And one brother climbed over the hill and deposited them in his brother's barn. And then the other brother gathered all the bushels together and climbed over the hill and deposited in the brother's barn. And the next morning they woke up and everything was back where it was. And this going back and forth over the hill, bringing the bushels of produce from their farm from one barn to the other, went on and on every night for months. And the brothers couldn't figure it out. And then one day, of course, you know what was going to happen. One brother, the one who was married and had a full family, he gathered his bushel of produce together and he started his way up the hill. And at the same time, the other brother who was single, he gathered his bushel of produce and he started up the hill. And the brothers are coming up the hill until they met at the top of the hill. They met on the top of the hill and they were astounded to find how each one of them was bringing half of their bushel, half of their produce to the other. And that's what had been going on for all these months. The brothers just kept taking half of their produce and putting it in each other's barn. And they embraced, they hugged, and they wept. And God looked upon this expression of chesed, of kindness, of brotherhood, of one brother taking care of the other. And God said, on this spot of mutual love, that's where I wish to dwell. Here, will be where my holy temple will be built. And so this midrash, this legend of the two brothers, is a legend of kindness. And it reminds us that God wants kindness. Olam chesed yibaneh. This world is built on chesed, it's built on kindness. And God cares so much about kindness that it was on the spot of the kindness that these two brothers showed for each other that God built God's temple. Now, how does this relate to Tisha B'av? Well, according to tradition, the temple was destroyed because human beings forgot this important lesson about kindness. And in fact, the midrash about why the temple was destroyed is the opposite story of the two brothers. It's a story of two men whose name sounds familiar. Somebody throws a party, and he invites his friend Kamsa to the party. But his assistant sent the invitation not to Kamsa, but to someone whose name sounds very similar, Bar Kamsa. But as it turns out, Bar Kamsa was the enemy of the person hosting the party. But Bar Kamsa receives the invitation. He thinks, wow, this is really great. I've been invited to this party. So he goes to the party. And the host sees Bar Kamsa come and says, what are you doing here? I didn't invite you. The invitation was for Kamsa, not for you, Bar Kamsa. Go, get out of here. But Bar Kamsa says, don't embarrass me. Let me stay. I'll pay for my plate. To which the guy says, no. Bar Kamsa, out. You're my mortal enemy. I don't like you. Get out. Go away. And Bar Kamsa says to him, please don't embarrass me. I'll pay for half of the party. And the guy goes, no. Go. Get out. I don't want to see you. Don't embarrass me. I'll pay for the whole party. The host, no. Bar Kamsa, I don't like you. Go. Leave. You got to leave. Now, Bar Kamsa was very embarrassed. But even more than being embarrassed, he was upset that nobody at the party was cared about his dignity, cared about his perspective. None of the rabbis, none of the teachers, nobody was there. And so Bar Kamsa, in his despair, according to legend, goes to the Romans and tells the Romans that the Jews are doing something wrong, and as a result of that, the temple was destroyed. Now in Hebrew, we call that sinat chinam, senseless hatred. The host of this party just couldn't see past his disdain, his hatred for Bar Kamsa. Even though Bar Kamsa offered to be a mensch, this guy couldn't see it. And even more, all the people in the party, they stayed silent. And that silence in some ways was a way of saying yes. And so the temple was destroyed for sinat chinam. And it's an important lesson, both of these stories together. On the one hand, God chooses the site, the place where God will build God's sanctuary, God's temple, the Beit Mikdash, because of the chesed, the kindness of these two brothers. And according to tradition, it's when Bnei Yisrael, when the people of Israel forgot about being kind, when they forgot about chesed, that the temple was destroyed. So as Tisha B'av comes this week, and as we continue to deal with this very challenging circumstance of the pandemic, of the coronavirus, we are reminded that no matter how challenging this moment is, what the world needs is chesed, is kindness. So as this week is beginning, let me say to everyone who's listening to the story, Shavua Tov, have a good week. But do at least one act of kindness. Go out of your way, call somebody that you haven't spoken to for a while, send a message to a grandparent, do the dishes without being asked by your parents, be nice to your brother or your sister, take the dog for a walk, do some act of kindness, some act of chesed, because olam chesed yibaneh, we build this world, the world that God wants from us, on chesed. Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.